How's it going, guys? Hitting the Christ 411, and just have a couple videos I need to do, so this is one of them. And I want to real quick talk about the topic of Nimrod. So I've had one dream that I know of about Nimrod, and I've shared it on this channel before, and I'll share it real quick and then get into the rest of the video. But I had this dream about Nimrod that I saw a timeline. And at the beginning of the timeline was Adam and Eve, and I saw the Garden of Eden. And then to the point of where Nimrod was, it was Abraham. So it was like from Adam and Eve to Abraham, and it was like the dots, and you know, the time in between Adam and Eve and Abraham is Noah and stuff like that. But I saw Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, and then Abraham's time period, but instead of Abraham being there, it was Nimrod. And he was really big for some reason. Like, he was really tall. He was big, and I didn't see his face because he had his back turned, but then he had a sword, and he had it pointed out at the side, like to the side like this, at Adam and Eve. So he was looking in the other direction of the timeline to Adam and Eve, and it felt like he had something against them and against God. So when you read Genesis 10:9, the Bible, or 10:8, it says, "And Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth, and he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord." So when you read that in Hebrew, it doesn't say mighty one. It says Gibberim. So there's a school of thought, a belief that Nimrod became, he was experimenting and wanted to become like the Nephilim and the children of the fallen angels. So there's a belief that he became, somehow he discovered how to become something more than a man. And this is why it says mighty one. And if you know in Hebrew as well, like another way to understand the phrase mighty one is Elohim. And Elohim is to be interpreted as gods, lowercase g, gods. All right, so there's Elohim, the Most High, but then angels and lower authorities are called Elohims as well, because they are mighty ones, but they're not the Most High. So somehow Nimrod started to become a mighty one. All right, and with Nimrod, even if that's not something that you want to believe, that I'm just hear what I'm gonna say, because I'm really gonna talk about something else, but I have to set it up. So with Nimrod, it's very interesting because when you read about him, there's only a couple of times in the Holy Bible, like the 66 canon, that you see him mentioned, but actually, technically, there's a couple of more times that I'm gonna bring it to the surface. But Nimrod, it says here a little bit below this that basically from him were all these cities built, and he had a kingdom. And we know that the Tower of Babel comes from through Nimrod's kingdom. All right, if you read some of the books that are not in the Bible, they talk a little bit more about Nimrod, but I don't even want to really 100% mention him. I just want to talk about what some school of thoughts are and get to the point. So from the dream that I had, and just from a little research, not only on extra biblical books, but just in history, because there's a belief that Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is about Nimrod. The Epic of Gilgamesh is about a man who was depicted as being very mighty and very strong, and being just having a fierce countenance, a fierce person. And it's a belief that the story of Gilgamesh, and even the way that Gilgamesh died, is really a telling of Nimrod. Part of me kind of believes that could be true, because if you look at ancient civilizations, they, for the most part, are depicting the same stories over and over and over, just in different ways. The flood story is depicted in numerous ancient cultures, if not all of the ancient cultures. Even China, some of their characters talk about the flood of Noah, which is like, how could they even, unless there's something that they knew. And then you have to understand, like, it's not like in the beginning of Chinese history that they were believing in the Bible. That's something that came to them much later. So how could they even have had characters of their language that are depicting the story of the flood? All right. So the Egyptians, all these other people, stories of the flood, right? So much so that people think that some of the ancient stories of these cultures are talking about, like, they'll say things like, well, there was a story of someone who resurrected before Jesus. So Jesus is not the first one. And it's just like, it's not true. Like, that's not how these stories go when they go into ancient Egyptian mythology and stuff like that, and all these different cultures. There's a root to these things. There's a similar pattern, because there's something that actually happened, the flood of Noah, and there was a point, a pinnacle after the flood, where a kingdom was built, a tower, the Tower of Babel, and the king of that kingdom was Nimrod. All right, so there's if you look through the cultures, there's this worship of this Nimrod worship, this worship of trying to get back to that point, trying to get back to the point of building this oneness, this powerful kingdom that ultimately it defies God at the end of the day. So I want to bring it in a little bit into our time, because I talked about this on a live video, but Nimrod worship and Nimrod's whole life, and him possibly becoming somehow mixed, somehow more than a man, a Gibberim, half man, half something else, is not too far-fetched from what we see in today's time. The movies are already showing this programming with I can't think of a million movies off the top of my head, but you've seen the movies of the cloning, you've seen the movies of the merging of man and animal, you've seen the gene splicing movies, you've seen the movies with experiments that have gone wrong, you've seen the movies of alien agendas, all this stuff. And it's like these same things that we see today were happening then. There's 100% fact that Egyptians were experimenting with what we would call surgery and anesthetics and stuff like that. They were already doing things like that. There's depictions in their hieroglyphics. All right, so when we come to our time now, it's very interesting, and I mentioned it on my live, but in order to be famous, people have to become more than themselves. They have to become more than what they are. All right, it's not normal for people to aspire to be famous and to be ruling in world domination. That's not a normal, that's just not normal. I said it in the live, like, I don't even remember even ever when I was a kid aspiring to have world domination, and this is stuff that I even seen in cartoons. You know, you see the Powerpuff Girls, Mojo Jojo wanting to take over the world, and Lex Luthor, and from Superman, like these different characters and different villains that want to take over the entire world. They want world domination. They want to be the most powerful. They want the most money. They want to be able to do whatever they want. That is never a thought in any child's mind. That's taught behavior. All right, and the Bible shows it, because before the Tower of Babel, you don't see people trying to do these things. You know, the Lord had divided everything out, the lands, and people went into their places, and he never, God's intentions for humanity after the flood was for them to be fruitful and multiply, to spread out upon the face of the earth, not to come and to congregate and to build a tower to reach the heavens. Whether people think that's literal or not, it got God's attention. Okay, it something about it was demonic, that he had to confuse the language. And this is how we get, obviously, the branch out of many languages in the world. All right, so this is the origins of the world we live in today, post-flood world. All right, so when it comes to fame, we have to understand that whether Nimrod started to become actually like a Nephilim and mixed himself for immortality. Why do people want power? Why do people set out to have world domination? Why do people do the things they do? A lot of times the behind the scenes thing is there is something they're in search of. and they need a kingdom. They need people a part of that kingdom. They need people to go out and to do their biddings and to do things so that because they're in search of something. All right, because they're in search of something. All right, and Nimrod, from what I believe, and just some school of thoughts, some research, the dreams that I've had, the one dream that I've had, and I've had another dream, but I'm gonna get into that later. But for sure, I have at least minimum one dream of Nimrod, but there's another dream I'm gonna mention later, but it's gonna make sense. But I believe that he was in search for something. The Bible tells us he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Now, that before the Lord doesn't mean that he was a mighty hunter for the Lord. It's just, this means like before the Lord, like in the eyesight of God, like in the culmination of everything that was happening in the earth, Nimrod had become someone who they even said was a hunter of man. Some people go as to say like a hunter of something with the DNA, something, you know. So some people believe he was a hunter of men because he was in search of something. You know, he was in search of something. So he came up before the Lord because of his ways. He came up before the Lord. That's why he's mentioned in this specific way. And he built the kingdom, and the Tower of Babel comes from him, and so on and so forth. So with this comes power. With this building a kingdom comes fame and things like that. And if you want to be more than a man, then you obviously have something in you where you want to prove something. You want to be powerful. You want to be over people. You want to have authority over. You want to position yourself in a way. And this is what we see in the time we live in, where I talk about it, but people want to be famous. People want fame. They don't want to live the mundane life. But this was never made for us. And this is why fame takes out so many people, because I talked about it, but influence and fame are like two different things. Like, I believe someone can be influential and do great. You could create a cure for something. You could discover something. You could whatever. And if you have real intentions to produce something to enhance humanity, then you are an influencer. You know, if you discover something with music and you do something creative and whatever, you know, you're an influencer. You know, at that point, you have the ability to influence people for the greater good. But fame is more selfish, in my opinion. Fame is like, you want it all for yourself. And if Nimrod really became something more than a man, if he accomplished something in his life that he became more than just a man, but really you're becoming less than a man, because it's an abomination if you became like a Gibberim. If you really became like, you mixed and accomplished something with yourself, and it was successful in your eyes, but really you fell into the same trap that Adam and Eve fell into, because you, at that point, it's like you fell into not thinking you were enough. So fame does the same thing to people in today's time. They don't think the regular life is enough. They're not content. They need something more. They need a backing. They need money. They need power. They need success. Then they feel that they will feel okay. But when you look into the statistics, how did Robin Williams, quote unquote, die? You know, how did Michael Jackson die? How did Prince and all these people, Whitney Houston and all these people? It's like they're dying on drugs. They're dying because of suicide and depression. Mac Miller, you know, people are overdosing. I was just doing a little bit of research on this R&B singer who passed away. I forget her name. I think her stage name was like Enchanted or something. I think she's from, I don't know where she's from, but I know she was signed to Gucci Mane's record label. And I had saw a video of her singing. Like, she's a rapper, right? That's how like they were promoting her. But I had saw a video before I knew she was a rapper. I seen a video of her singing on a reel, and I was like, oh my gosh, this young lady can really sing. Like, I watched the video like a couple times, and I was like, whoa, like, who is this? Like, I didn't even know she was famous or like coming up. And, you know, I was like, you know, okay. And then a couple months later, I found out that she dies. And I think it was from an overdose. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, man, so much talent, so much, you know. And it's just like, to hear how she went out is just like sad. Like, it's just, hate hearing stories like that, you know. And it's like I said, like fame comes with a lot. When you're famous, you have access to more drugs. If you're already on drugs, you have more access to, for men, a lot of women. If that's an addiction, you know, you have people wanting your autograph, people wanting this from you, that you don't know who to trust. Like, it's a lot that comes with it. It's not meant for us. The one we should be worshiping and serving, and Jesus is Jesus. He should be the most lifted up name of all time. He is going to be that. He is that. But on this earth, there's people like Nimrod who want to be more than men. It's not normal to be famous. This is what Satan wanted. He didn't have the mind and the heart to be like our Father, who influences everything because of his presence and because of his life and who he is. Satan wanted the opposite, which I believe is fame. You know, some people are famous by accident. You know, they're not trying to be. Certain things happen, this happens, this and that happens, and before you know it, they got a hit record or something, and they just acquire fame. And, you know, then there's people who seek it out. And I believe that's a different thing, and the enemy definitely wanted that. And what does the Bible say about the Tower of Babel? It says they built the tower, but they said, let's make a name for ourselves. Who taught them this ideology to let's make a name for ourselves? Who taught them this? Well, if things are passed from the head down, and Nimrod is the king of the kingdom, this is learned behavior. This is learned behavior. You know? Why did I see Nimrod pointing the sword at Adam and Eve? I believe that he defied everything that is God, and he defied the lineage that he came from, and he defied the one who created the first man. And Nimrod's not mentioned that much in the Bible because we know how his end probably came. All right, was he successful for a little time, for a short period? But what does the Bible say about the Antichrist? The Bible talks about the Antichrist being successful for a short period. But what had to happen? He had to, the nations and everyone had to give their power, and the false prophet and the dragon, for him to even have, just to have a seat. So if it takes everything for the Antichrist, the nations, the world to come together and give him a portion of what they have, for him to have a seat, and if it took all these people to build this tower and to say, hey, let's make a name for ourselves in the kingdom of Nimrod's, you know, Nimrod's stuff, and if he was seeking out to be more than a man, whether that was just fame or if he really became something literally more than a man, that should let you know that fame is demonic. The intention that most people have that want to be famous, there's a demonic element. Because if God knocked down their tower that they wanted to say, hey, let's build all this and make a name for ourselves, and Nimrod, a mighty hunter, becoming a Gibberim, and if in the end times the Antichrist can't even become what he is unless Satan himself, the false prophet, and the nations, the 10 kingdoms, give to him, that should let you know that world domination is demonic. It's not right. It's not right for people to want to be in a position to lord over people, to have the most money, the most power, the most success. That's not the will of God. That goes against the initial 10 commandments that you read, like the first 10 commandments. Like, you know what I'm saying? That goes against that heavily. You must love the Lord your God and him only. You feel me? You're not supposed to have no other God before him. So how can you love God? You're breaking the first one when you start to seek out fame, because you have to, like I said in the live, an element of your God-given self, the part of you that I believe, the part of people that allows them to accept Christ, like the motivation it takes to seek out fame, I believe somewhere in there is a similar aspect that makes people have the will to say yes to Jesus. And I believe a lot of people who are like really famous, like Jesus says, it's hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom, because I believe like there's that part of you is a hard part you have to let go, because you're doing everything on your own. You want everything for yourself. You have acquired all these resources, and it takes so much to keep it. it takes your mind, will, and emotions to try to keep the fame. You can't focus on God and keep the fame at the same time. It's hard. That's why most people who you see who've had some success that really believe in God, like, they typically just don't even keep up with the way success is. Like the route they have to go to keep those movie deals and to keep the whatever, all of that, and the music. You can't really live that way and then live for God. You cannot serve two masters. So I believe fame is a portion of what it takes for people to be selfishly motivated to acquire fame. You have to kind of dead a portion of what it means to be a follower of God. The rich ruler who Jesus, when he said, I've done all these things and kept them and everything, and Jesus said, well, sell all your possessions, give all this stuff away. And he just walked away. He just walked away. Technically, in order for him to serve God, he would have to dead that part of him, that self-glory, that I have all these things, I've acquired all these things, and now you're asking me to give it all away to follow you. He didn't do it. So technically, even in that story, having power, money, and things like that could turn people away from God. Because a lot of times the things that we acquire is who gave it to you at the end of the day. Who gave Nimrod these kingdoms that he built? It wasn't God. God knocked it down. He proved it is not for me. The rich ruler of that story with Jesus, who gave him those riches and everything? Was it God? Or did he go acquire all of that? Did he inherit all of that? And was he just trying to be a follower of Jesus to add to his stock and his level of fame and acquire in his resources, for him to say, well, I'm also a follower of this guy? Because maybe at the time of that day, that's maybe how it was. Maybe it wasn't a heavy price that people had to pay to follow certain people in that time and to be a follower of the Sadducees and Pharisees and this one and that one. Because, you know, there was not only just the Pharisees and Sadducees. John had disciples. Jesus had disciples. The Essenes had disciples. There was multiple groups. I heard, and I've done some research, that there's over 15 groups at the time, the same way that we have denominations, that people were being baptized into. So to just not have the pressure to follow, to give up everything and follow a group is a pressure that maybe some people never had to face until Jesus came. When you got a guy who clearly is the Son of God telling you, well, give up all these things and follow me. So I say all that to say that the price of fame is a real thing. Nimrod wanted to be so mighty in the earth that it's an idea, maybe it's even true, that he literally became something different than a human being, to be so different and to be so just an authority and a famed person in the earth. He gave up his humanity for it. That's crazy. That's just crazy. So be careful. I say all this to say, be careful of the things that we seek out. Even myself, like, you know, it doesn't have to be fame. I'm just saying, like, anything. Like, if it's gonna take you away from God or take you out of the presence of God, like, look at Cain. His decision, when the Lord said, well, if you do this, sin is waiting for you at the door. His decision led him away from God. And he went and he built a city named after his son, you know, and the lineage of Cain was completely obliterated because only Noah and his sons and his wives made it to that boat. All right. What would be crazy is if one of Cain's great-great-granddaughters or something was one of Noah's son's wives, but that's just me thinking. That's just me being like, I always question, like, I have like questions or like, what if, and then I try to, you know, I read the Bible study. That's what we're supposed to do, you know, seek the kingdom like children, you know, just ask questions, like, You know, because where did those wives come from? You know what I'm saying? Whose daughter is one of those women? Why was Nimrod one of the sons of Ham? What was in Ham's bloodline? Seriously, was it Ham or his wife? Because through Ham, you get Nimrod, and you get the curse that came upon Canaan. And there's a lot of things that happened with Ham's bloodline right away, within the first, from starting on the boat, after the boat. I mean, once they landed and everything. But I just wanted to share that, and I just wanted to say that you know, be careful what we seek out, you know, in this life, because if it makes you to become something different, if you start losing that peace, if you start losing the joy you once had when you were in the presence of God, you gotta start checking yourself, because you might start to become something more than just a regular person, which is really something less. And God has to deal with that, you know. And the reason that I said that Nimrod is mentioned in more times in the Bible is because if you go to the book of Revelation, I might have to make another video on this, but Revelation talks about the angel, Revelation 9, the key to the bottomless pit, right? And it says that Apollyon was released from this bottomless pit. And what's interesting, it's a nugget. I'm gonna leave with y'all a nugget until I get to this video. And I've been saying I'm gonna make this video for a long time. But you gotta think about it. Apollyon was released from the bottomless pit. The Bible says that Apollyon was the one who is, hold on. Let me find Revelation 17. Forgive me. Revelation 17. It gives him the same language, that he's like the one who was and is to come. Kind of like when you say that Jesus is the one who was and is to come. But hold on. It's somewhere. If I can't find it, that's kind of like where I'm coming from. Okay, I found it. It says, the beast that thou sawest, Revelation 17, what the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. So Apollyon is the spirit that uses the Antichrist. A lot of people just say Satan. Of course, Satan is like the overarching, so he's a part of it. But the spirit that inhabits the Antichrist is Apollyon. That's why it says in this one, the beast that you saw that was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, shall go into perdition. It says, and those that dwell on the earth who shall wonder after him, names were not written in the book of life. And they shall behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. So the Antichrist has the spirit of Apollyon, who's in the bottomless pit. But what you have to understand is, it's using that same language, because in the Revelation it tells you that Jesus is the one who was and is to come. But the Antichrist is the one who was and is not, because he's going to get cut off. You feel me? So who is Apollyon? Who is Apollyon? This is a revelation I just got recently. If Nimrod really became a Gibberim, if he really somehow made himself not a man anymore, and he was somehow fused with angelic or Nephilimic, if that's a word, that means that when he died, and remember, you gotta remember the story, the Epic of Gilgamesh talks about Gilgamesh. I think how he died was like all his body parts were like cut, you know, asunder and placed in different parts of the world. Man, I don't know, man. I might have to wait to talk about this because this video is getting long. they cut him up and put him in different parts of the world. If he was not a human, that means that he's now a disembodied spirit, and that his death means that he cannot be even categorized as one who could even go into Hades the same way that a regular human who's disobedient to God could go, because he's not a human like he was. So it makes sense that if he died, then whatever he mixed himself with, or whatever happened to him, he was locked away more than just, there's some fallen angel activity with him is what I'm trying to say. He was locked away more than just judged like a regular person. And for some reason, the spirit that used him, because I'm not talking about the flesh, I'm not literally talking about like Nimrod, but somehow whatever happened, the fusion of whatever, he was locked away, and now he's able to ascend. And this is the spirit that will dwell in the Antichrist. You feel me? And there's all this talk. I don't want to go too deep into it, because there is some real, like, if you do your real research, there is the governments and stuff like that with this whole finding Nimrod's body, and that's a real thing. So that's that. And let me show you how demonic some of pop culture is. I used to be a huge Yu-Gi-Oh fan when I was a kid, when I was in middle school. Yu-Gi-Oh was my thing. And I'm telling you, I was good at Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, you didn't want to play against me, all right? Any nerdy, like, stuff like that, I'm really good at stuff like that. I don't know, it's just the way, I don't know. But I was really good at Yu-Gi-Oh. When I got saved, I mean, I've been gave up Yu-Gi-Oh, like, 9th grade, like, high school. But one of the first cards that came out in the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh, and if you drew this card and you collected all the pieces, you win the game automatically, was the card Exodia. Exodia, the real name of the card Exodia is Exodia the Necromancer. And if you know what necromancy is, it's witchcraft. Exodia was the card that if you pull all the pieces, so it's literally, I think it's like 5 different or 6 different cards. And if you pull them all as you're playing the card game and you have them in your hand or whatever, and you play them or whatever, you just win the game automatically. That was in the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh. The epic of Gilgamesh is that Nimrod's whole body, if we're talking about the same person, which it does line up, I'm just saying, Gilgamesh was killed with all his body parts being cut up. If you read the extra biblical books, now I haven't read this story for myself, but I've done the research to just know that if you read about Nimrod, the extra biblical stuff, it is said that something similar actually happened to Nimrod after he was killed. The real true story with the body parts thing. So it's very interesting, like little things, like when you look in pop culture, you see, oh wow, so Exodia, the necromancer, the warlock, the witch, is a card that is cut up into different pieces. And it's a reason that's there. That's, where do you think that comes from? There's no story in history about something like that. But here's the thing. Exodia, if you see the card, Exodia is locked, he was locked away in chains. What does the Bible talk about? The Bible talks about Apollyon being resurrected, and Exodia is supposed to be the card. If you draw this, all of these pieces, you automatically win the game. And I remember back then, like, everyone was like, yo, I gotta get Exodia. Exodia was the guy. Like, you get Exodia, you win. And they had all this Egyptian lore, and he's like gold, you know, plated and everything. And he's huge, you know, huge. And it's just like crazy, because like Gilgamesh is depicted as a huge dude. Nimrod, the way I seen him in a dream, he was a huge dude. Like, it's things like that in culture. You have to like wonder, like, where is all this stuff coming from? Why would a show like Yu-Gi-Oh be inspired by something like Gilgamesh? And then his name is Necromancer. So you can't say it's not demonic, because his name is Exodia the Warlock, Exodia the Necromancer. So these are things that I've seen, and this revelation is deeper than this. I can't talk about it in this video, because if I tell you the revelation behind the Tower of Babel that the Lord gave me in the pop culture, I literally just had a dream about it the other day as well. Like, I've been had the revelation, but I had a dream that confirmed it, and I was like, oh my goodness. There's a lot of things in pop culture that all go back to that, because in these ancient civilizations, Nimrod and the Tower of Babel and the flood were known by the people who dispersed into their own languages and moved about the face of the earth. So when you look into Chinese culture, Japanese culture, where a lot of this stuff is put into our cultures, Yu-Gi-Oh comes from over there, the East. They put these things in there because the folklore of the things that they heard. You got to study Chinese history. When you study Korean history, when you study Japanese history, then you start to put pieces together. When you study Egyptian history and South American and African history, like the cultures of the world, within some of these religions they have, and some of the stories that they tell, they're telling you about the Tower of Babel and Nimrod. They're just telling it to you in a different way. So the Epic of Gilgamesh makes so much sense to me. It just makes sense. Okay, and if I'm not gonna go into that, but I'll go into this a little bit. The Greeks, when you do your research and really understand, the Greeks even had I forget the name of the god that they worship, lowercase g god, but after the flood and things dispersed out, eventually the stories were told, and it's word of mouth and stuff like that. The Greeks actually took to worshiping Cain, but under the name of another, like a god, like I forget, it's a name we all know. I can't think, I don't know if it's Neptune or something like that, but people think that they're just worshiping just lowercase g gods, and it's just like their religion. That Greek mythology stuff is real. There's a lot of stuff in there that it's just names have been put over the names of real things and real people and real stories. It's not real in the way that Zeus was the, obviously we live in a world where Jesus is God and stuff like that. So these people are not all that there is, the Zeuses and the Poseidons and stuff like that, but they're given new names and stuff like that for a reason. So it's deeper. I'm not gonna go into it, but the fame is all I'm saying. It's destroying people. This is Nimrod's religion. This is the religion of his time that has crept into the last days that we live in. This is why the system is called the Babylon system. When you read the book of Revelation, verse 17:5, and upon her head was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. This is in all capital letters. And I saw a woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of martyrs of Yeshua. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Why is John wondering after her with great adoration? Babylon, the spirits behind Babylon are still here. Who was the king of Babylon? All right. So if we live in a Babylonian system, and the Bible was telling us that the system is called Babylon, the whole thing is called Babylon, who was the king of Babylon, and who's going to be the king that is going to be given a seat in the last days? It's the Antichrist. What spirit is behind the Antichrist, though? Of course, you got Satan and the false prophet, the dragon and the false prophet, but what spirit? It's Apollyon. Notice, Apollyon is a Greek word. That is a Greek. It's very interesting that in the book of Revelation, the Bible gives you Apollyon. It doesn't give you another name, like a Hebrew name or something like that. It gives you a Greek name, Apollyon, What does Apollyon mean? Apollyon means great destroyer. What was Nimrod? He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That's not a good thing, that term. That's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. It sounds good if in the English, but that's why we need to, sometimes you go and read it in the Hebrew. You go and you study it because it's not a good thing. He became a Gibberim. Okay? He was a great destroyer. There's a connection, at minimum. If you don't want to believe what I'm saying, there's a connection between Nimrod, Apollyon, of course, Babylon in the book of Revelation, the Tower of Babel, and the nations that dispersed outside of the bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The other nations, all they knew was, if you wasn't following Noah, Shem, and Abraham, and that lineage, you were getting into some occultic pagan stuff, because there was no understanding of who God. People, they were rebelling against God and just populating and telling the stories without the proper context. The people who kept the story true was a bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then you get Joseph and Moses, and we get Jesus, David, Jesus, all of that. The bloodline of those who kept, that God kept in line to bring Jesus into the earth, to bring Yeshua, the Messiah. So I just wanted to share this. This became something more than I thought, this video, but God bless everyone. I pray that this makes sense. It starts clicking. And last but not least, fame is a little demonic. All right, influence is way different, but fame is selfish. It's Nimrod's religion. He became something more than just a regular man, but not more, really less. He even got tricked by Satan to live the life that he lived. All right, and we can see these connections between him and many figures in pop culture. I could go deeper, but I don't want to make it so long and overdo it. But yeah, God bless.